Welcome to Ask Earl Anything. And this is the show where your questions get answered. Your questions make the show. Without your questions, we don't really have much of a show. Now, I've done 2 shows last week, so this week I'm in a 3rd week of doing shows, and I got 2 more questions after the last show. So 2 questions. Hopefully it'll be a relatively short show. Last week we talked a lot about NAM and a lot of things last week. It was my anniversary show, my 1-year anniversary doing this. This is my 49th show, maybe even my 50th. I still can't figure out the count of that thing. But let's start. So my first question comes about my studio, and it's from a guy named Albert Crane, who must have got my email address from somewhere because he knew my email address, found it, and he asked me a question. He says, do you think a room 16 foot by 10 foot wide would be big enough to build enough for my drum room? I have a 4-piece kit, 20 by 14, 8 by 12, 14 by 14, 5.5 by 14. I would also would that be big enough to practice a small group? I value your opinion, and the basement is unfinished. I have a total of 20 feet by 15. It would be nice to have a room for all the other stuff. He also asked, how do you soundproof it? And the next question, he asked me a couple questions about this. He asked me about building this studio. And I've had some experience building a studio. So let's talk a little bit about studio construction. And of course, is that room big enough? The size room that you said, 16 by 10, is totally doable for a drum room. Many of the drum booths back in the 70s in recording studios were smaller than that. So, I mean, you can definitely do something in a recording studio with a small room. I actually recorded my wife's album, Stephanie Bennett's album, or Mrs. Hammers, she's known to many of you. I recorded her album, Toward the Lamb, in an 11 by 11 bedroom. And I recorded different band members at different times. I did some things where I would record guitar and drums, or bass and drums occasionally, but most of it was tracked with a keyboard player and everybody was overdubbing. So it's not the ideal situation for a band. But I did record a bluegrass album in there with 4 people in the room and myself, and we recorded a bluegrass album in that little bedroom. So there's things you can do to make things work. So I would tell anybody, don't let the room stop you from getting into this. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to jump in this day and age and in this society where recording is not a big, huge Neve desk and a 24-inch or 24-channel 2-inch machine. You probably, with a laptop and a couple microphones, can record drums in a bedroom studio, no problem. Now, is it comfortable? That's the next question. So in this room is 19 by 17, my main room, and then I've got a side room, which I think is another 6 or 7 by 18 or 19. Okay, it's about the same length this way, but maybe it's 17. I'm not sure. The bottom line to the whole thing is I have a lot more space now than I ever had. Okay. Now, as far as soundproofing, this is not a soundproof studio, believe it or not. This is a 3-car garage on the end of a street, not on a major road. I've got cinder block walls, so I have some sound treatment on the walls. I've got acoustical foam. I have packing blankets. I've got a wall of equipment and magazines that really make part of the sound of this room. Carpet on the floor. I've got a low ceiling, probably 7.5 feet ceiling. So it's not ideal for drums, but I make do with it. And I think you can make do with any studio. I had a studio in New Jersey, and this is my lesson. This is my lesson about studios: is don't worry about the studio before you get the equipment. Get the equipment and use what you got until you've got your studio. One of the things, great mistakes in my life was when I was 35, living in New Jersey. I wanted to build a studio. I had a 2-car garage. I started building walls, but I had no equipment. And then I lost the gumption. Is that the word? Gumption, whatever. I lost the passion for building a studio, and I had a very cold drum room without heat, no AC in the summer, no heat in the winter. It was just a garage with lots of unfinished walls that took me to the last year I was in New Jersey to finish. And then when I finally finished it, I bought an ADAT and an ADAT small board and a couple preamps and a couple things, and basically started recording, and it was pretty bad. But then I was moving to Florida. And once I got to Florida, I had my wife's album to do. I bought another ADAT, and then the whole wave of digital recording happened in 2000. This was 2001 when I moved here. 2002, I bought my first digital recording workstation, DAW, which was Digital Performer. I bought an audio interface, a Motu 828, and I had a Mac G3, and I started recording. And that was the beginning of my recording studio. And from there, I moved to here in 2005. I bought a G5 computer. I've bought 2 audio interfaces. Actually, I bought 3 now. I'm in my 3rd audio interface. I'm on my 3rd recording computer officially. From the G4 to actually it was not a G3. It was a G3. I started on a laptop G3, a Blueberry laptop G3, and then I had a G4, and then I bought a G5 when I got here. I finished my wife's album on a G4, and then I bought a Mac Mini in 2011-12, and now I just bought the iMac 27-inch 5K screen version. So that's what I'm using now. So I've been through 5 computers. I mean, recording studios take up a lot of time, space, and money. You got to keep upgrading. But as far as soundproofing goes, I didn't soundproof when I was recording in that bedroom studio. My neighbors knew I was doing stuff in there. That's all I'll tell you. So if you're he lives in a townhouse, so soundproofing becomes more of an issue. So how do you soundproof? They usually say build a room inside a room. Well, building a room inside a room means you basically have like at least about 6 inches of airspace between the walls. I have my friend Steve Cruz, who has a studio that's built on, I think he's got hockey pucks. He built it up off the floor. That's the riser of the room. He took the room off the floor, off the garage floor, put hockey pucks on it, built the floor, false floor, and then he built a room within a room design inside that garage, and that's where his studio is. I think his studio is like 17 by 20 or something. So it's not that much bigger than what you're talking about, maybe a little bit. He had a little odd corner. The one thing you don't want to have is square walls in a studio. You want to have a studio that's got some shape to it. Like if you look in this corner right here, this is kind of one little alcove I have 2 of them, which is about 2 feet of sheetrock that's angled, which kept this room from being square. I think that makes all the difference in this room not being a square room. You got a square box room, you're going to get a boxy sound. There's no doubt about it. So that's part of what you're thinking about in studio design. Now, my studio design was totally by accident, okay? And I really think what attributes to it is the non-squared walls, 17 by 19 room, the couch, 40 years of Modern Drummer magazine, 20 years of Sound on Sound magazine, all the equipment on this back wall that I built, okay, and the foam. And you put it all together and I got a decent sounding room, okay? So I didn't have anybody come in and spec it out. There are guys that do that kind of stuff. They cost you big bucks. If you want to go a different route than building it yourself, you can buy a little booth that'll probably fit a drum in it, and it'll cost you, $5,000-$6,000, but it would probably soundproof the drums completely. Which is why a lot of guys go to electronic drums, which goes to my next question. My next question and my last question is from Michael Perry. And Michael, I'm going to read Michael's question because Michael's question, it kind of put me a little on my heels for a second. Now, Michael's a friend. Michael used to run Drummer's Den. He's now merged with All Classic Drum Covers, or All Classic Drummers Den, I think is what it's called. I mean, it's Tony's show now. Tony kind of runs it, but Michael was the one who invented Drummer's Den with Uzi and a bunch of other guys, and I think Raphael's in there too somehow. So Michael's been around a while, but he asked this crazy question, and he's been asking some questions, and I appreciate your questions, Michael, trust me, so keep asking them. This was on one of my songs. I'm trying to think which song it was on. Oh, I think it was on the the crazy pop tune I did, the Ariana Grande tune, which is a whole nother discussion point. Okay. He said, very cool song. You played well. For your next Ask Earl Anything, please explain why you refuse to convert to electronic kits. There are amazing sounds you can get from an e-kit today. Is it the feel, the sound? Most e-drummers had to convert because of the loudness of drums. Please give me your thoughts on this. Well, first off, Michael, I don't refuse to use electronic drums. I wanted electronic drums way back in the first versions of electronic drums. My first idea in the 80s when I saw the Simmons SDS5 kit was I wanted one of those. Now, it turned into the biggest fad ever. By the time I had money to buy a Simmons SDS5 kit, it was long gone, and Simmons was out of business. That's when I could afford an electronic kit like that. Okay? Now, when it comes to recording real drums or recording electronic drums, it's as simple as this. All of you know that I love playing jazz, and if you watch me, you know I have a certain touch. Believe it or not, I don't play as hard as I looks. I just did a cover of a Queen song, You're My Best Friend. And that was for Mrs. Hammer too. Happy Valentine's Day, Mrs. Hammer. Tonight I'm actually recording that. This show on Valentine's Day before she gets home from work. And my thoughts were, when I was doing it, was just to play. But I actually wasn't playing that hard because the headphone mix and the track, and I basically wasn't hitting as hard as it looked like I was hitting. And like the cymbal crashes were not as hard as it looked like. I have a certain touch. I believe that music's about feel. I mean, one thing about electronic drums is cymbals do not sound like cymbals to me. I mean, you get 5 or 6 different levels out of it. You get those kinds of sounds, but you don't get... I mean, there's 5 or 6 sounds in that bell. Acoustic drums have a certain feel and vibe to them. Now, the fact that I have a studio means why should I spend $5,000 to get a real electronic drum kit? Because trust me, I will not be happy with the little Elisa's toy or the Simmons toy from Guitar Center. And I'm calling them toys because they may be a good starter set for a kid that's a beginner, but they're not going to give me what I want out of them. You know, I'm going to want something with, you know, almost pro-level electronic cymbals. Okay, I'm going to want something that's got lots of great sounds in it. That's going to cost you a lot of money for the module. Okay, then I'm going to want pads that are almost like real drums. Okay, and then I want the cymbals to feel like real cymbals. So the amount of money I have to spend on that, I could buy 7 or 8 more of these ride cymbals. Okay, I mean, this ride cymbal is about $500. Okay, so $3,500 to $5,000 I got to spend on a real electronic drum kit. For what? To get more sound choices? I enjoy getting sound choices out of my DAW. My DAWs, I can get sounds out of that if I want to work hard. You can get sounds by muting, taking mutes off. You know, you can get different sounds by doing that. I like getting the sounds. Now, if I didn't have the space, and you know, a couple years ago when I was in my transition and I was thinking about maybe moving into a condo, one of the first things I was thinking about was, well, I'm going to keep the walnut kit. I don't know if I'm going to keep all the drums on the walnut kit. I'm probably going to keep a 5-piece kit or something. I'm going to keep a few cymbals to take on gigs, and I'm going to have to sell everything. So there goes the concert tom kit. There goes the little jazz kit. There goes most of my cymbal collection. And then I'm going to sell all that off, and then I'm going to buy an electronic kit to have something in my house. So the electronic kits for when I can no longer afford the house, no longer want to run a studio, and I'm ready to go pretty much retire. That's when I'll jump into the electronic realm. Or unless something changes in my life and the electronic kit seems like the way to go for me. But at this point in time, I'm not ready for it. So I'm not refusing So I don't want it. Okay, I want my acoustic drums. I like my acoustic drums. Now, do I use electronics? I got an SBDSX. I've got samples for it. If I need an electronic sound, I can pull that out and do it. And I've done it. I actually did a couple covers last year where I used electronic drum sounds. One was Money for Nothing. Another one was Man in the Mirror, Michael Jackson. So I'm not afraid to use it. You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to use it. So it all depends on what I'm going for and what I need to do. But there is nothing to me like acoustic drums. And with my touch, and I'm still developing my touch, that's the most important thing to me, is that I develop my touch till the day I can't do this anymore. Because I've been working for 40-something years on getting a nice jazz ride cymbal and playing dynamically, you know. I'm playing in a church now that we play all acoustic. There's no microphones on it, no click tracks, no Avion systems. We got 2 wedge monitors on the floor and 2 speakers out in front of us. It's a traditional Presbyterian church that we're playing in, and the kit sounds amazing in the room acoustically, but I've got to keep my dynamics down. Now, a lot of drummers can't do it. They got to have a big plexiglass shield around them to do it. I pride on myself on being able to play a gig where the people don't have to move the table in front of me. I used to do weddings that way, where we did not have it mic'd up back in the 80s, because nobody was carrying a sound crew and a light crew and everything else they carry today for a wedding. You basically went in there with 2 Shure Vocal Master monitors. That's where I first started, and then eventually got some better, you know, EV Voister theaters and all kinds of other stuff for speakers. A couple monitors facing back at everybody to hear themselves, and that was it. It was all acoustic, you know. Today it's gotten crazy. It's gotten out of hand because the equipment's come down in price and people can afford mics, and you know, so everything's all mic'd up and loud. But when you got to play in a small room without any microphones, I've done it. You can do it. That's learning how to play with touch and feel, and it's not it takes more technique, believe it or not, to do that than to play all the crazy linear patterns that everybody's doing. Because there's guys that can play linear patterns all day long, and they can chop me out off the floor, but they can't play light. They can't cut their dynamics back. And if you want to play a gig, you got to be able to play light. I was just watching a YouTube by Steve Jordan a couple minutes ago. My Memphis Drum Shop put up something with Steve Jordan and this bass player from Memphis. He's played on things like Let's Stay Together, the bass player. I can't remember his name. Howard something. It was not Howard Grimes. I forget the bass player's name. I think it might have been Howard too. But anyhow, this bass player's played on a lot of albums. Steve Jordan's playing with him, and here's how he's playing. This is how they're in a room, and he's doing stuff like. He wasn't playing anything heavy, just playing light foot, kick and snare, you know. He wasn't. I mean, you don't have to play that hard all the time. Playing that hard is cool, but you don't have to. But it's nice to have to that dynamic range and everything in between. That's what you want. You want dynamic range. And I think that's what's missing in electronic drums. I haven't found any electronic drums that are that sensitive. I'm sorry. Even I've played, and I've had to play in churches where I have to play E-drums. I've played them many times. And I make them work. I mean, I've played with band. I was playing at this recovery church a couple months ago, and they were shocked how I pulled it off. But for me, I found the sound. I found the intensity of the stroke I had to get a certain sound, and I kept it where it needed to be, so I wasn't throwing it off, because it wasn't the loudest stroke that I liked the sound of. But so I had to find that spot, and then when there was a build, I had somewhere to build to the higher, louder spot, you know, the louder snare sound. Again, that's using your ears. Okay, so to answer your question, Michael, and to read it one more time, I don't refuse to convert to electronic drums. I see a lot of validity in electronic drums. I think things that a lot of drummers are doing, using DAWs, using battery or Stephen Slate drums or Superior Drummer or whatever the DAW is, that's the way to go to mix your drums in. And guys like you and Beats by Jay and Mike Luke and Rob, and there's a lot of guys that have a great setup and they get a lot of great sounds out of electronic stuff. But for me, man, it's all about the acoustic drums. It's all about the acoustic drums. Got one more comment. I think I read it in my Ariana Grande. When I mentioned Ariana Grande, I did a video on Ariana Grande, and I used some cymbal stacks, and somebody asked me some questions about the cymbal stacks. Now, one of the things I've stolen from Little Drummer channel, Jeremy's channel, is I try to put my equipment list in my videos. So if you ever wonder what I'm playing on a video, which cymbals they are and that, I usually try to put it in there. And if you don't think it's true, which maybe once in a while I maybe just cut and paste in something, if you don't think it's right, you can write me on it. But I did put the correct stacks in that video. And the stacks were this. I had a set of 505 hi-hats, and I had a little stack over here which was 12-inch Wuhan with an 11-inch Noiseworks Splash. Peisty Noiseworks Splash on top of the Wuhan China. And that was the one stack. And then I had, on a hi-hat stand, I had my 18-inch Peisty 2002 China with a clutch on it on a 16-inch Peisty Signature China, thin China. Peisty Signature 16-inch thin China with 2 rivets. And that was the other one over here. So I had like a tight one, and I had this looser one. And then I had 2 crash cymbals. I believe I had a 16-inch 2002 thin crash over here and my Giant Beat 18-inch thin crash over there. And that was the setup I used for Ariana Grande. So, why don't I do more stacks? If the music calls for a stack, there's a stack there. If the music doesn't call for it, I don't need a stack. Like, I'm not feeling stacks in playing Glenn Miller, In the Mood, which I just did a cover of. One day it'll come out. Or when I'm doing anything on this kit, I don't feel like that's stack world. But if I had to do a stack and on this kit, I could figure a way to put a stack on here if I had to. Oh, one last thing for Ask Earl Anything. This drum kit, this tom right now, is now on the Tama tom stand. So I got the Tama tom stand, and I got the Tama snare stand, and I got 2 Tama classic hardware cymbal stands, and I've got the classic hi-hat stand, and I love them. And this weekend, I'm taking them on a gig. So maybe when I pack it up, I'll do a little video on the pack up in the house before I'm playing at church this week. I'm bringing my drums this week. So I'm really looking forward to having my drums on that gig. So anyhow, that's it for Ask Earl Anything. I'm trying something different. I just recorded the whole show, the whole entire show, on my overhead mics. But I also want to give Michael Johnson a shout out. He recommended this lapel mic, which hooks up to my iPhone. So I'm actually recording this with a lapel mic to my iPhone, and I'm testing that sound. But I also got the studio mics on because I figured the studio mics will pick up any of the drum playing I did do. This lapel mic, Michael, I just want to let you know I had some real hard times getting your link to work with my Amazon app. So I ended up buying it in my Amazon app. But thank you for recommending it. Looking forward to using it on my wife's projects. Anyhow, till next time, your questions make the show. Ask questions. And thank you for watching Ask Earl Anything. Please like and subscribe. And I'll talk to you soon.